It all started in the living room on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The Johnson family, father, mother, and their two grown children, sat around the coffee table, laughing as they unboxed a set of DNA kits. It wasn't serious. Just a fun idea sparked by a TV commercial. "Let's see if we've got royal blood somewhere in our veins," one of them joked. The father chuckled, the mother smiled, and the children teased each other about who would have the strangest ancestry result. They filled out the forms, swabbed their cheeks, and sealed the kits, never imagining that those tiny tubes would hold the power to change their lives forever. Because what was meant to be a light-hearted experiment in family history was about to uncover a secret buried deep for 40 years. A secret that would shatter their marriage and their family. For anyone who knew them, David and Margaret Johnson were the perfect couple. Married for 40 years, they had built a life admired by neighbors and respected in their church. David was steady and hardworking, the kind of man everyone turned to for advice. Margaret was warm, graceful, the heart of their home. Together, they raised two children, both now adults with families of their own. There were even grandchildren in the picture, little ones who loved gathering at Grandma and Grandpa's house on holidays. To the outside world, theirs was a marriage made of stone, unshakable, weathered by time, and stronger with every passing year. People often pointed to them as proof that true love could last a lifetime. So when the idea of taking a DNA test came up, it wasn't about doubt or suspicion. It was simply curiosity. A way to trace their heritage, maybe discover roots in distant lands, maybe even pass down a family tree for the grandchildren to cherish. It was meant to be lighthearted, harmless, a family project to bring them even closer. After all, what secrets could a family like theirs possibly hold? But sometimes, the families that seem the most perfect are the ones hiding the deepest cracks. And the Johnsons were about to find out just how fragile 40 years of trust could be. Weeks later, the email finally came. The whole family gathered again, this time around the dining table, eager to open the results. The grandchildren leaned in too, curious about whether their family tree stretched back to faraway places. David clicked on the first result, his. Mostly English and Irish, with a surprising sliver of Scandinavian. Margaret's results came next, Italian ancestry she never knew about, sparking laughter as the kids teased her about her hidden pasta blood. Then came the children's results. The room filled with excitement, until the first shock appeared. One of the children's profiles didn't quite match David's. At first, it looked like a glitch, a missing strand where there should have been a connection. Margaret laughed nervously, brushing it off as a computer error. "Maybe the lab mixed something up," David said, forcing a smile. But a silence began to creep in. The children stared at the screen, confused. David leaned closer, his smile fading as he scrolled through the charts again and again. The results were clear, something didn't add up. What would you do if you were sitting at that table and saw results like this? Would you believe the test, or look for another explanation? Let me know in the comments before we reveal what happened next. Because for the Johnsons, this was only the beginning. At first, no one wanted to believe it. "It has to be a mistake," David insisted, his voice sharp but trembling. "These things aren't perfect. We'll order another test." Margaret quickly agreed, nodding too fast, too eager. The children exchanged worried glances. No one wanted to upset their father, but the doubt was already planted. So, they did it again. Another set of DNA kits. Another round of waiting. This time, the mood was heavier. There were fewer jokes, fewer laughs. Everyone felt the weight of the question no one dared to ask out loud. When the second results came back, the truth could no longer be ignored. Once again, one child's DNA failed to connect to David. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a mix-up. It was real. David sat frozen, staring at the report, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. His breathing grew shallow, his face pale. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Tell me this isn't true." The room went silent. Margaret's eyes darted from her husband to her children, searching desperately for an escape that didn't exist. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tears welled in her eyes. The children shifted uncomfortably, one of them whispering, "Mom?" But Margaret stayed quiet. David slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. "Answer me," he shouted. His voice, usually calm and measured, cracked with pain and rage. Margaret covered her face with trembling hands. The silence that followed was deafening. The perfect family image had shattered, and all that remained was a single unanswered question. Whose child was it? For 2 days, the Johnson household was a storm of silence. David barely spoke. The children avoided the house, unsure of what to say. Margaret moved like a ghost through the kitchen, haunted by a truth she had buried for 40 years. Finally, on the third night, David sat across from her at the dining table. His face was tired, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. "Margaret," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me the truth. Was there someone else?" Her hands shook as she clutched the coffee mug. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. When she finally whispered, her words were so soft they barely carried across the table. "Yes," she said. The air in the room collapsed. David closed his eyes as if struck, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. The children, who had gathered in the doorway, froze in disbelief. Margaret's confession spilled out in broken pieces. It happened decades ago, during a rough patch in their marriage. David was working long hours, distant, while she felt alone and vulnerable. A man from her workplace offered her comfort, a brief, regrettable mistake. She swore it meant nothing. She convinced herself it would never surface. But now, here it was, undeniable, staring them all in the face. If this revelation shocked you, imagine sitting in that room. What would you do in David's place, walk away, or try to forgive? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable true family stories. David pushed back his chair, trembling with anger. 40 years, Margaret. 40 years I trusted you. His voice thundered through the house, echoing into every room. Margaret broke down in tears, begging him to understand. But forgiveness was nowhere in sight. Because now that the secret was out, the real damage was only just beginning. The days that followed felt like living in a stranger's house. David moved into the guest room, barely speaking a word. The laughter that once filled the Johnson home was gone, replaced by silence broken only by the creak of doors and the sound of muffled sobs. The children struggled most. One felt torn between protecting their mother and defending their father. The other pulled away completely, refusing to answer calls or return home, too hurt to face the truth. Holidays, once the heart of the family, now loomed like battles waiting to happen. David's anger simmered just beneath the surface. At church, people noticed his absence. Friends whispered when Margaret showed up alone. The perfect family that once drew admiration now attracted pity and gossip. Arguments broke out in bursts. "You lied to us," one child shouted through tears. "I did what I thought was best for this family," Margaret cried back. "Best?" David's voice thundered from the hall. "You destroyed us." The grandchildren, too young to understand, began to ask questions. Why isn't Grandpa sitting with Grandma anymore? No one had the heart to explain. The tension stretched like a rope ready to snap. Attempts at family counseling collapsed after the first session. David walked out, unable to sit in the same room as Margaret. The Johnsons had reached a breaking point. What do you think happens next? Can a marriage survive this kind of betrayal, or is 40 years of trust simply too much to rebuild? Comment your thoughts, and if you're still with me, hit the like button so this story reaches more people. Late one night, David stood at the front door with a packed bag. His hand lingered on the doorknob, his eyes heavy with sorrow. And with that single turn of the key, the life they had built for 4 decades began to unravel completely. Because David wasn't just leaving the house. He was leaving the marriage. When David walked out that night, something in the Johnson family broke for good. He rented a small apartment across town, leaving the big house to Margaret. The sight of his empty chair at the dining table became a daily reminder of what had been lost. Margaret tried to hold the family together, but the damage spread like cracks in glass. One child refused to forgive her, while the other clung to her side, desperate to preserve some sense of family unity. Gatherings became strained, conversations sharp and bitter. At church, whispers grew louder. Friends who once admired them now spoke in hushed tones about the secret that destroyed the Johnsons. Margaret felt the weight of judgment everywhere she went. David, too, wasn't free from torment. Alone in his apartment, he replayed every year of their marriage, questioning every smile, every promise. Had it all been a lie? The child at the center of the DNA revelation carried the heaviest burden. Torn between loyalty and betrayal, they struggled with a new identity, wondering if their entire life had been built on a secret they never asked to carry. Counseling was abandoned. Calls went unanswered. What once seemed like an unshakable family was now a house divided, with no bridge left to cross the gulf between them. And just when it seemed the dust might settle, David made a decision that would change everything, once and for all. David's decision came quietly, slipped into an envelope, and delivered to Margaret one late afternoon. It was the divorce papers. 40 years of marriage, dissolved with a signature. For David, it wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. He could no longer share a roof with the woman who had betrayed him, no matter how long ago it had happened. For Margaret, it was a crushing reality. The life she had built, the image she had protected, was gone forever. The children were left trying to pick up the pieces, torn between two parents they still loved but no longer saw together. The grandchildren would grow up with separate holidays, separate homes, and a fractured legacy. The Johnsons had once been a model family. Now they were a cautionary tale. And all of it began with one simple DNA test. Sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes, it destroys everything you thought was real. For the Johnson family, a simple DNA test, something meant to spark laughter and curiosity, uncovered a secret buried for 40 years. A secret that ended a marriage, divided a family, and left scars that may never heal. It's a reminder that behind every perfect picture, there can be cracks we cannot see. If this story moved you, subscribe for more true family dramas, share this video with someone who loves real-life twists, and let me know in the comments, would you take a DNA test?